Okay, so let's do this. Thanks very much for being here. Happy to have you in this format. Um, and thanks very much to ADP List also for their invitation. My name is Arman, and we're going to talk about something what I like to term as problem sensitivity that is going to help us to find startup ideas for the next hour or so. Okay, so my background a little bit. So I started off with an AI PhD probably over 10 years ago. And I started the PhD 2009 and I went through to 2014. Uh, the topic of the PhD was around predicting financial markets, stock markets, forex markets using AI, online news text mining of online news headlines, let's say. It was very interesting um, um, PhD or a research topic, and one of its benefits was that the problem statement was relatively clear. I decided to, narrow it down and refine it to okay, intraday trading. So within the day, in the next 2 hours, is a particular index. Let's say in this case, the forex, Euro USD, is this going to go up or down? Now, this is interesting because we're going to come back to this, the importance of clarity of the problem statement. But just again, a little bit to the background. So the past 10, 20, 24 years, I've been probably 10, 12 years in larger companies, worked at T-Systems, so was a part of telecom and at the service of Shell, um, managed data centers, and then Zalando, helped build a product analytics group there, and then later on at Henkel, helped build I built a larger personalization group there, focused on e-commerce. At the center of it is CDP, a customer data platform, collected all data and allowed for the experiences of thousands of websites and dozens of e-commerce websites that we had for the various brands there to be personalized. So I've had this focus around personalization for over 10 years, probably starting off with a startup, and the other 10 12 years of past 10 12 years has been around startups. So I started off, did a number of startups. I did a few in Malaysia, then I came to Germany 2014. Did one Sentientic, which was called Sentientic, around marketing intelligence in Germany, in Berlin, and that morphed into kind of understanding personalization, going deeper and deeper. But I've done also a few other startups before that, Cyber Advertise, which is something like Delivery Hero, was 2011. English Lab was an online English school. And then about a year ago, I've come out of my last position to join the AI revolution again. I've started another startup this time around. The focus is around coaching people who are looking for their next step in the data and AI world, as well as startups in the data and AI world, or people who are about to start startups or want or do have startups and want to grow them. And that's what we call Elevate Soul.ai, which is in the making. Now, going back, the biggest challenge for most of the PhDs is just this problem definition. Understand the problem space, and then you have to narrow it down to a concrete problem, and then you have to define your contribution. It's a huge challenge. It takes at least a couple of years for people who are lucky to manage to do that. And the same thing is the case for startups, interestingly. So in startups, usually understanding that problem space and being able to define it is the biggest challenge. And I'm going to submit to you today that even that's the case, that's the main differentiator for a startup as well. What's the depth of the problem understanding that the founders of a startup have, and then their ability to execute against that problem understanding. So startup success is all about understanding problems, and this is what we want to go deeper into and see if it holds true. But before that, we just step back for a second and think together what a business is. And this is probably You know, these things is the key difference between, let's say, an Elon Musk and someone else, right? The longer you are in this game, the deeper your understanding of some of these basic concepts become. And one of them is what a business is, right? And a business is essentially, in simple terms, a self-sustaining solution to a problem. So, and those three terms are key. A self-sustaining solution to a problem. Okay, let's see what we mean by that. So what does it mean? It's a self-sustaining solution. So you have a problem, you have to come up with a solution for that problem. That solution is usually your product or your service, and you sell that product or service. And people are going to buy that if they feel that the value that they will get from that product is higher than the price that they pay for it. The value, the perceived value, the value that they are going to get or they perceive they're going to get must be higher than the price that you have set that thing on. And the other thing is that your price must be higher than your cost, of course, right? Your price must be higher than your cost, of course. So that difference between the value and the price generates demand. So if something is very valuable at a reasonable price or at a price that people say, oh, it's a good thing, then there is a lot of demand for that product. If it's the other way around, if it's like, oh, it's too expensive, then there's no demand for it. But if it's at the right price and the value is, there is a difference between value and the price, demand is generated. But of course, for you to be able to stay in business, you have to produce it at a higher level than your cost, because otherwise you won't live, right? So that's the air, that's the margin, that's the air that the business needs to be able to stay alive and grow. So that's one thing. So sustainability from a perspective of it's a vehicle and it should stay afloat, right? And for that, it should be profitable and it must be profitable. And in order to solve the problem that you desire to solve, the only way for you to be able to tackle that problem is for you to be profitable, to generate financial returns, so that you can solve the problem. Of course, it's important to get that order right. That the most important thing is your mission of solving a problem. In order to be able to deliver against it, you need to be able to generate enough financial returns to be able to do so. If you think, oh, I'll just, the primary goal is the money, and then we'll see what problem we can solve, most companies won't survive in that form. That's one of the greatest lessons that also Steve Jobs again proved after returning to Apple, and has explicitly and extensively talked about it. Then the question is, what's value, right? How is value generated? And value is generated through solving. So if someone has a problem, you solve that problem, they're receiving value. They feel that what you do is valuable. So value is created through solving a problem. So what is then important is, as for example, Paul Graham from Y Combinator, the founder of Y Combinator, points out, it is often harder to notice problems than solutions. It's often harder to notice problems than solutions. And most of the people who are, software engineers or in the product space, we always talk about problem space and solution space. And most of the time, engineers, all of us, we try to go to the solution space. And it requires a lot of discipline to stay in the problem space. And that's what we're going to try to practice today together a little bit. And that's why there's expressions like this: fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Yeah? Fall in love with the problem, not the solution. Or 90% of the solution to a problem is understanding the problem, right? So we want to kind of try to practice together and shift our mindset from what product can I build, what's a product idea that I have, to what problem can I solve? What problem can I solve? How can I master that problem? Okay. Now, hence the logical question becomes, what is a problem? if you want to be able to master identifying and defining problems, you have to have an understanding what a problem is and where problems come from. And a basic definition for what problems are or what a problem is could be a gap between the current reality and a desired state. A current reality and the desired state. And I'm going to propose to you today that there's at least 4 dimensions that if you observe, which we're going to call problem sensitivity framework for the sake of this presentation, you're going to have the right mental framework to be able to define things in a way that is going to be impactful. So the first aspect is that when you say think about a problem, you have to be able to articulate the underlying need. The underlying need. And those underlying needs in the human context are usually timeless, right? They're timeless problems. They're problems in principle. And one of the best ways to articulate them is to use the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you've seen the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or if you like it, just write yes in the chat for me, right? So there is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs says all the human needs start from, the bottom says physiological needs, right? You need food, etc. Then you need clothing. Then you need safety. Then there is love and belonging. Then there is esteem. Then there is self-actualization. Now, you can kind of play with the words. You can find better terms, but this pyramid, these different layers of needs, and shaping an understanding of the different levels of the needs that human beings have is crucial. Is crucial for understanding where the game is and where the problem is and what it is that is being tackled. And I'll give you some examples. But already, if you look at this, you can see, as I wrote on the left side, the things that are kind of deeper needs like food, clothing. There might be a much larger market. There's a bigger market, but then at the same time, things are sometimes a lot more replaceable. Or even if you have like your food delivery company, right? If you're using this food delivery company or that food delivery company, you want to get to your food, there's probably less brand loyalty to a particular food delivery company, right? So it's a more functional need. Then there is things that are close to your self-actualization. There are things that are close to your identity. And as they're closer to your identity, then there is a higher brand attachment. There is a higher brand loyalty. Excellent. And in that sense, this is also something to observe. Now, of course, there might be like smaller markets because for people to identify with something, there's like smaller groups of people who might, identify around the brand, be it a car brand or anything else. So that's just one observation. But just let's go back to needs, human needs, first layer. Second layer is, so we identify the need, and that need, which then is helping formulate the problem, then there is some kind of a manifestation of a solution, right? And then there is things that are problems around that solution, right? So that solution, the existing solution, for example, might not work. So it's about the experience of that solution, or it might be emotionally annoying, right? Or it might be difficult. It's not intuitive. It's difficult to learn or to operate. It's a cognitive problem. It might be slow, or it might just look bad socially, or it might be expensive, or it might be just unavailable. There's no solution, right? Or it might be inflexible. So when you're thinking in terms of these types of things, you're thinking about the form, right? About the experience, right? So the need, which is like the major problem. Then there is problems around the experience. Second dimension, depends if there is an existing solution or not an existing solution. Then there is a third one that you have to observe, okay, that problem, how intense that problem is. And you can observe it by how frequently it occurs, how many times a day or a week or a month, how many times in a certain time period it occurs, and how urgent is it for people to solve it. And if they don't solve it, what is the cost to them? If they don't solve that problem, what is it that they're paying, right, in not solving it? And are there existing solutions that people are using as workarounds to solve that problem? So this is the third dimension that is going to be very helpful in thinking about problems and defining them. And the last one is understanding what we can call problem awareness, right? Which is kind of very much in line with understanding of markets and if a market exists for a problem. So if there is a problem, let's say, take a simple example, right? So, people are going from point A to point B, right? Maybe they're not aware of any problem. They just go from this city to that city and takes 10 days, and that's what it is because they're, walking, or they're, riding their horse or whatever. And then there is another layer of awareness where they say, okay, no, it's taking too long, right? So they're aware of the fact that there is a symptom, there is something's not right. It's just too long for just traveling time. Then there is a third layer to say, oh, there should be, the traveling time is too long, or the traveling is too slow. Let's say here you're already defining the problem. You're even problem aware. And if you know that there is a vehicle, a transportation vehicle, that the transportation vehicle is not good, or the transportation vehicle should be faster, then you're sort of solution aware, right? So depending on the product that you're offering, people might be in different stages. They might be completely unaware that there is a problem. They might be aware of the symptoms. They might be aware of a problem that is articulated, and they might be aware of a solution or similar solutions that exist. That's also key. That understanding of that aspect is also key, and that's the four aspects. And when you get that, so essentially, then you're saying, okay, there is a problem, and all what I'm doing is that I'm trying to design a form, in form of a product that is delivering an experience against that need, right? So that's how well you do it is going to be your solution effectiveness. So the thing is that we have to, in order to master problem articulation, but in a startup context, we have to be able to flip back and forth constantly between this kind of problem space solutions, and we shouldn't get confused. And this is what we're also doing in this presentation to an extent. So first step, just to be explicit, we're going to call it need-based articulation. And this need-based articulation, the closest thing that I've seen in terms of literature and the books that one should read and has tackled this topic is a framework called the Jobs to be Done framework. If you've heard of the Jobs to be Done framework, write JTBD for me in the chat. Yeah, so like Jobs to be Done framework. So a lot of people are familiar with this guy, Clayton Christensen, who wrote this book, Competing Against Luck, and from a academic perspective, he gave many examples to explain, why you have to be thinking about in terms, like when you think about products, you have to think about the job that product is getting done for you. So you think in terms of jobs, which is in terms of the real needs, not in terms of the product, but in terms of the real underlying need that product is solving, right? And you've heard this example of is this, if you drill a hole in the wall, what you're actually trying to get is, let's say, the hole. You can even ask, like, why do you need the hole for, etc. But you need the equipment to be able to deliver on that, right? So and there's many other examples. So there is a job to be done, and this framework is an amazing framework. And these are the other books that have kind of come off When Coffee and Kale Compete, and the other ones that kind of off the back of that have popularized this framework, and they're kind of worthwhile reading. But the point is that we have to observe closely, think deeply, empathize with the user or the customer, understand the frustration, and there is where the opportunity is. And the master, probably one of the greatest product managers of all time, Steve Jobs, has a talk actually from 1997 where he talks about this. You've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. And he explains like all the different, how many times he's got it wrong, and how difficult and painful it was for him to learn it. So, but that understanding has matured in him greatly, and that then leads to when in 2001 they come up with iPod. If you say, oh, it's an MP3 player, you're thinking in the solution space. You're saying, oh, it's a product, right? Whereas you say, okay, people need to listen to music, and if they want to listen to music, the first thing they want to do is that they want to have all of their music, and they want to have their music in their pocket. They call it full music library, or 1,000 songs in your pocket. So that's reframing from to in context of iPod. You can kind of clearly almost see it there. If you go to 2007 iPhone, same thing. So it's not another phone, it's a device, it's a multi-purpose sort of a pocket computer. And in its launch, if you remember, he was standing there on the stage and he was saying, okay, we have three new devices, sort of a ultimate iPod, a new phone, an internet communicator. And he was saying all these three devices are one. And that was the kind of the moment for everyone that realized that Apple has come up with this device that does all that. But the clarity, so first of all, it's not like a phone that does those other things on the side. Each of them is a clear problem, has to be solved to the best extent possible, plus the fact that everything is kind of put together. Now, these examples might still be a little bit complex, so I've collected a number of kind of simpler examples that are kind of one-dimensional that might be helpful for the purposes of our conversation. How many people use Loom? If you use Loom, say Loom in the chat for me. If you use Loom, say Loom in the chat. Excellent. So Loom has been around for quite a while as well, and now they've become more and more popular. I think actually Atlassian bought them for about $1 billion, and that was sort of 0 to 1 billion for them in about 10 years, I think. But their understanding was that it is not about screen recording, right? So what they're doing is that, oh, we're another screen recorder. They're helping you communicate in a context, right? And when you want to share a message with someone, you want to capture, narrate, and share instantly. So it's not about, oh, let me share my sort of record my screen and you save the file and then go somewhere, try to share it end to end. You just go there, boom, one click, you get your screen, you see yourself, then you can share it. And that focus around the problem, underlying need, which is communication, and that awareness, is the reason for success in this case, right? Let's look at another example. Stripe is also another good example. Now, before Stripe, most people were kind of thinking about payment gateway, right? So again, solutions-based payment gateway. But what the problem that Stripe solves is that all you want, like you have a website, and all you want is that you want to be able to collect money. You want to be able to accept money. And you want to do it in one step, preferably. And that's the problem that Stripe solves. So you just go to Stripe, couple clicks, and you can accept money. And that there is a huge difference between being a payment gateway and a one-click accept money type of a solution, right? And that's the reason for their success, I submit to you. Another good example is Notion, right? So Notion, we went from building websites, and people are just, there's so many solutions to build websites, but building websites is not the end goal. What you want to do is that you usually want to have some kind of a content that you would like to share, either internally or externally. And you want to be able to do it online. You want to be able to share your content online. It might be a wiki, it might be whatever, it might be documentation, anything. They have made that process super fast. And that's why they're very successful. You couldn't do it in Google Docs with the same experience. You couldn't do it website builder with the same speed. So you see that they kind of carve out the need, and by focusing on that need, that what are we doing is kind of sharing online, they can become what they have become. Another good example is Uber, right? You could have said, oh, there is another taxi app, but the focus is not being another taxi app or book taxis. The focus is on ride predictability. The problem is that you book a taxi, you want to make sure that you know that it's coming to you, or you book a ride, and you can see it on the map. You can see how far it is, and it's coming towards you, and what's going on. So this certainty, was crucial. And then, of course, the payment integration of the payments. You don't have this problem. What can I pay, or do I need to have cash, or can I, do I need to have my credit card, etc. You just pay, and those two things together, make Uber to a large extent what Uber has become. Another example is Calendly. Simple example, right? But everyone thinks about in terms of calendars. That's solution space. Whereas you have to think in terms of scheduling, right? So in this context, it's not about having calendars. Like there is another person who doesn't have access to my calendar, would like to schedule some time with me. And that scheduling capability and focus on that scheduling is what brings about Calendly. Okay. Another good example is Shopify, right? So it's not, the need is not about having another online shop, having an online shop. That's not my need. My need, or the need for the customer or their customer, is that they would like to sell something online, right? There is a different framing, different formulation. This is exactly what we're trying to do. You say, I'll help you build an online shop. You're a few steps away from the actual problem. You have to solve the problem, the online need. The online need is that that person would like to sell online. And that helps you determine all your product KPIs and everything. The faster you make that person with the fewer clicks to be able to sell something online, that allows you to be successful. And that is what has allowed Shopify to be successful. Okay, so I hope those examples were good. If they were, let me know in the chat. Start and stay in the problem space with a need-based articulation is what we're doing so far. Now, as we're thinking about the problem space, we're thinking about what needs to be done. I can do a little segue, and because sometimes when you think, oh, what should I do, and say, oh, follow your passion, follow your passion. And this distinction between what a passion is and what the problem space is also super key. Now, if you understand your problem space, what needs to be done, and you say, okay, there is this part of my passion, or this corner of the problem space I'm passionate about. Okay, that's very good clarity. But there might be a lot of things that you're passionate about that might be absolutely useless, or it might be very difficult to find out how to make them useful. So you have to start with the problem space, and in the problem space, try to say, okay, what's the corner that you're probably most passionate about? And as you're doing it, you have to constantly be aware of the solution space, because that's where all this feasibility discussions lie. Now, if you think about the solution space, let's think about how you think about solution space as well. You have to understand overall solution. We have to understand solution sort of adoption, or technology adoption. We have to understand technology capability. We have to understand technology life cycle, and we have to understand technology adoption. And one of the great books, of course, there is this Crossing the Chasm, which is like a classic. And how there is technology enthusiasts who go for product first, and then there's some visionaries, and then how do you get to the larger sort of the parts of the market, and the challenges along the way is the underlying theme in this book, the chasm. But this also explains how the adoption process takes place. But there's this other book, The Innovator's Dilemma, which is from Clayton Christensen, which is also a very famous book. Also a favorite book. It's also Steve Jobs' favorite book, one of his favorite books in this context, that explains why a startup beats the big guy, because the big guy somehow systematically, physically, they're not incentivized to invest in the new solution because their existing solution gives them a larger margin. So the new solution does not make financial sense for them. So they're usually not, they can, if some manager wants to do it, the board and the governance model doesn't allow them to do it because they have to kind of concentrate on making the larger profit that they can make on their existing solutions. And what happens is that by the time they understand that there is potential in this new thing is already big enough and it's very hard to compete with them. And that's the key topic that is described in that book, Innovator's Dilemma. And it's one of the good aspects to think about when you think about solution space. But in general, my point being is that, understand technology, understand life cycles, adoption cycles is important. But then also, just like passion, you say, okay, there is this need, right? And then so in that need space, okay, where is this piece that I can solve with new technology? So if you like AI, or just go for the sake of AI, try to do something. That's very much just like following passion. But if you understand the need space, the problem space, you see this corner of it can be solved with AI for this reason, and AI is the best tech to apply there, then we are in the right sort of thought framework. So let's go a little bit even deeper. And I like this whole AI products management space, and let's take AI and go a little bit deeper with AI. So first of all, we hear that AI is the new electricity, right? So AI is the new electricity. So there is electricity that is available, right? AI is available. And how do you use this electricity? What devices can you build that use this electricity? So that's why it's a good, good analogy, a good metaphor. If we want to do that, then we have to understand what is electricity, right? And we have to understand what is AI. And in order to understand what is AI, we have to understand what is intelligence. Now, next few 4 or 5 slides, I'll go probably a little bit too deep. They're from another talk that I go a little bit deeper into AI intelligence. I might skip some aspects of it, but it might be still interesting. So if you're thinking about this space deeply, it might still be interesting for you. So what is intelligence? Then you have to, you can even look it up in Wikipedia, what's abstraction, and how can be abstraction and logic, the basis of understanding, and a lot of other things that comes kind of with it. And then how you try to create an artificial system, an artificial intelligence that does the same thing. What are the key elements of it? And this research has been going on for a long time, and understanding and being able to look at things as an agent and the key characteristics of an agent in terms of perceiving, analyzing, and acting in a certain environment. That is key. The other thing that is key to understand with regards to the current revolution around AI, and we're just taking this as an example to see, okay, can we look at the solution space, and then we've looked at the problem space, and we want to see, okay, if we were to kind of come up with an AI startup, what would be our ideas coming from, right? Then there is a second thing that we have to understand after the nature of intelligence, the nature of AI, is there was this so-called there was and there has been this thing called Moore's law, if you're familiar with it, right? So that counter transistors in the integrated circuit doubled every 2 years, and that was sort of had the exponential effect that allowed for all these computing revolutions to take place in the past 20-30 years. Now we have what we call the neural scaling laws, in which the count of the parameters that an LLM can use is increasing every year by many fold, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is a much more even exponential type of a growth. And how you compare different LLMs, you can kind of look at different characteristics, but one of them is certainly the count of the parameters. And everyone's talking about it, from Satya, the CEO of Microsoft, to CEO of NVIDIA, etc. They've been talking about this, and this observed, and you can read about it. This is from Wikipedia again. Neural scaling law, being aware that this exists, and this is empowering this next revolution. And if you just look up the count of the type of the parameters that the different LLMs have, and if you see even from 2018 to 19 for different models, how it has gone from way below 1 billion to, a year ago already at 1,500 billion or 1.5 trillion. And that's a very interesting number because, and such a short span of time, because if you look at the brain, and this is another part of understanding it, that the cerebral cortex, which is where most of these cognitive things happen, you have about 16 billion neurons. And now these neurons are somehow comparable with the parameters that we have for an LLM. So when we talk about 1,500, 1,600, that's 100 times, the count of parameters that we already have in these LLMs is 100 times these bigger than the count of neurons that we have in the most, significant part of our brain, which is something that, was unfathomable, was unimaginable just a few years ago. And most of these superhuman capabilities that we're seeing from these existing AIs, is kind of, it can be associated with this ability. So this is another, thought. Then you want to understand the upcoming architectures. And one key architecture that we have to understand is agentic AI. I would refer to it as an architecture, and I'll probably even show one slide quickly what it is all about. But what is an agent? I can have memory, it can have planning, capability, action, but most important, it can have tools. So I know the LLM doesn't have to have an answer for all questions. It can look up things in the calendar. You can use a calculator. It can use Google search, and that construct and how you put it together and how you essentially wrap software around intelligence gives rise to a new architecture paradigm, which we can refer to as agentic AI, which is very exciting. And the need for its existence, I argue, that the LLM itself is this lower layer. If you compare it with our brain, it's almost like, we want to remember something, or we intuitively know something, or we recall something. This is a retrieval system, right? So we call something, how old are you? You pull a number from your memory, right? You call it. This is an abstraction. It's a retrieval system. This is what the LLM does. But when you pull that number, pull that answer out, you have to keep in your conscious memory and do some kind of active logical operation on top of it. You need some kind of a workflow. So how old are you going to be in 5 years? So you take your age, and then you do the +5 and get to come out to another number. That one is happening in your kind of conscious awareness. The storage and where it, the learning from it, or regardless of the granularity and the abstraction layer level, is in almost like your subconscious. So one way to think about it is, as I propose, is that the LLM is kind of covering almost the subconscious abstractive retrieval mechanism. And then you need to have a layer, which is a layer software that kind of allows you to, architect your software workflows around it. And that's why this agentic layer becomes important. And in there, the dynamic control flow that becomes possible with these, decisions being pushed to the LLMs at the time of operation, it makes it a clear kind of a distinction. But I don't want to go deep to the architecture. That's also another talk, which is something that I'm passionate about. But I wanted to just point it out that as a result of this architecture, then you can make a GPT 3.5 be more effective than a GPT-4. The LLM, of course, on the GPT-4 side is much stronger, but with this kind of a software-oriented architecture workflow design that helps you create agents with inputs and outputs, with access to tools, etc., you will have the ability to make that much faster, which is super crucial, because at the end of the day, we want a system, right? It doesn't matter if it's GPT 3.5 or 4. We want the system to solve a problem. And when the agentic layer can help us solve the problem more effectively, then we will go for that. And that's where we're going. And that's why you have these newest versions of, even ChatGPT with the O1 and all the other ones are in the agentic design type of thing. Okay, so but this level of depth of understanding is necessary if you want to do something with AI, let's say as an AI startup founder, right? That's why I went deep, because you have to have a philosophical positioning around what AI is and its architecture and everything else. And that's why ChatGPT is successful, because there was an Ilya there, and they've thought about it from a philosophical standpoint from in his case, a couple of decades. So defining problem space. And when you think about this AI information problem space, another way to look at it is I would say, okay, if I want to go back to my underlying needs, what is the need in the Maslow hierarchy of needs that I'm delivering, against with this technology, or this technology is most effective on? And there is this extended version of Maslow's hierarchy that actually has this section, cognitive needs. So this cognitive needs, need for meaning, right? There's actually a layer for it, perfectly matches with this need for understanding. So this is between, between this sort of belonging and esteem needs, self-esteem, right? So you're kind of in control, and your self-actualization, you want to act. There is this spectrum of a very strong need for understanding your environment. Okay, and hence we can put that layer of cognitive needs there, and AI kind of solves for that. And now understanding this is super key, because then if you look at the different technology kind of solution waves, so we say Wikipedia, right? Well, what does Wikipedia do as a solution? It's information availability, right? Information availability. Now, there was internet that gave us information access, right? Because there was internet, there was access. You could access things. Then there was Wikipedia that kind of collects information, makes it available, right? But previously, there was some book, you had to go find the book. You had to probably travel to another country to find the book. So if you compare Wikipedia with a physical encyclopedia, and in a context that the encyclopedia is also not available at every bookshop, then you can kind of understand, okay, there is availability problems, there's the access problem. And then there is these layers of retrieval problem, what Google solves. First generation retrieval problem is what Google solves. Second generation retrieval problem is what ChatGPT is solving for, which is, you can access information. And now instead of having like so many tabs open, you just go to one chat and you just follow your thoughts from philosophy to everything that you might find to Wikipedia, everything else in the same chat flow, which is the new form factor. And then you have and then at the same time, it helps you digest it. You can ask it to summarize. You can ask it to, explain it in a different way. So that's even another layer, your information digestion. So I think there is at least these 4 layers that can be defined. Somehow, from the other angle, this is also key. If you've seen this, if you know what this is, just say yes in the chat for me. There is, the data, information, knowledge, wisdom pyramid, which I've been talking about somehow, referring to in different talks for the past many years. This is also super key. Understand all of information theory, understand this pyramid, how you go from data to information to knowledge, wisdom, and what are the differences, how abstraction helps you to go up this pyramid. And the key thing that helps you go from data to information is actually indeed intelligence, learning, understanding. From information to knowledge is intelligence, learning, understanding. And from knowledge to wisdom is the same. And then you can couple that with this beautiful sentence from Claude Shannon, the father of information theory, saying information is the resolution of uncertainty. So here you have more, down the bottom parts of the pyramid, you have more entropy, you have more uncertainty, and then you structure your structure. You have, you decrease entropy and you decrease chaos, and you increase certainty and structure, and you have these abstract layers. And hence, when you're wise, you can kind of foresee, you can predict, you have predictive capabilities. So your understanding goes from bottom of the pyramid high to the top of the pyramid. So does your predictive capability, which then flows into a lot of other things. Another way of looking at it is, okay, now I have Gen AI, which is generative AI capability. And this allows me to produce and consume at all of these layers. I can produce and consume data. I can produce and consume information. I can do the same for knowledge and wisdom. And that's one way of looking at like product dynamics. And as a result of it, you can land into these kind of almost like 3 levels of high-level product buckets opportunities in the world of AI. Some people are focused on producing a blog post, producing a book, consuming, reading, summarizing, consuming information, and orchestrating, which is more like the pipelining and what kind of infrastructure you need to be able to automate this, or automation flows, etc. So these 3 buckets are key. And then you kind of mapping your needs, and you kind of know these product buckets, which will then define your markets. And then you have to know, okay, what is the thing that you're selling in that context. And there's many books that help you structure your mindset around it. For example, Disciplined Entrepreneurship is a good one. And the Afton is the existing market, new market, etc., that I talked about also in that problem awareness space. And then there you have to, of course, have an understanding of the market size and market validation. How do you find your beachhead market, which is your first market to tackle? And then, what's your total accessible market and what's your go-to-market strategy? Those are the things are, of course, important to have in mind. But so you have the need, you have the kind of the solution understanding, but then you also have to have an implementation cost, right? Because you have to be, your price should be lower than your price should be higher than your cost. Your cost should be lower than your price, and your value should be higher. So then, and this implementation cost is also important to understand. And then there is also this sort of a wave of many possibilities in the context of software. One big wave is, of course, the code generation with AI, and leading there is probably Cursor AI. If you've used Cursor AI, please write in chat for me. Amazing code generation capability. Of course, there's other things like Replit, that it's not only code generation, but you just say, okay, here's the app I'd like to do, and then it just produces it and deploys it, and you have a live app. So you go from sentence to live app in a few sentences, which makes us much more effective and faster. Now, of course, there is another parallel thing to this, what we call the no-code, low-code kind of almost like revolution, which I feel that is becoming very effective. A leading contender there is Bubble.io, which is essentially drag and drop building software, but this has become very effective on many fronts. So understanding this is also super key. But this is different from the AI generated, because the AI generated code, there's no code, low code. And of course, you can have no code using that AI generated, or these things combine, and or the AI generated code can kind of empower this as well. But I would look at them with different pillars in terms of capabilities. And then there's a third pillar that people also mix up with those ones, where in terms of you're getting your tooling right, you have to have an understanding for, which is things like Make.com and NAS and Zapier, etc., which is like workflow automation. But these are automation workflow frameworks. Of course, you can connect to different AI actions using them, build agents, etc., from that perspective. But these three things from implementation perspective. But again, to go back, job of an entrepreneur: identify a problem, design, build solution, make sure it's self-sustaining. And then you have to have fitting, and if the fitting has to happen from problem to market, right? Is the problem valuable enough, regardless of what the solution is? You have to understand, if I come to you and say, I solved this problem for you, how much would it be worth? And if you could land that, you have problem market. So you have established your value. Then you have to create a solution that solves that problem. That's what we call problem solution fit. And then you come up with this product, and if the product actually sells, then you have the product market fit. I think these three fits and understanding the differentiation is also super key. One's about value, one about if the thing is functional and works, and one is about if people are actually going to pay and buy it. And all of this, journey should be very iterative, and the iterative capabilities, of course, best explained in these books, The Lean Startup, which is then a follow-up of what Steve Blank started off as, was explained, for example, his book, The 4 Steps to Epiphany. So Steve Blank was essentially the professor for Eric Ries. Eric Ries then started off with his startup, and then which led to the Lean Startup revolution, which you know about, which is about this idea, sort of build, measure, learn. But on those things, I think this problem sensitivity space is missing. That's why I tried to say, okay, there is job to be done, there is lean startup and customer development, and then there is this problem sensitivity, but you have to really understand what problems are and define them. And that's why I did this talk. So there is a long difference between knowing and being able to do, but I think we managed to make it in time. Maybe we have time for 1 or 2 questions, but with that, I'll leave it to you. Thank you very much. If you'd like to write a quick question in chat, happy to take it. If not, we'll prepare to transition. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Atia. Thank you, Kirill. Thank you, Milan. Is there a framework for deciding whether it's worthwhile to build a solution when competing solutions already exist? I think the Innovator's Dilemma was a good book in that context. I think the Lean Startup is key. Definitely that book, Lean Startup, should be read. I don't know, Milan, if you read it. If not, just give me a call and we'll chat. And anyone else? Thank you. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you, Joseph. Excellent. So we're kind of preparing to transition, but feel free to stay in touch or get connected, and we can always do that. You can just connect me on LinkedIn, and we can definitely have a chat if there was any topic that you wanted to follow up on. Of course, medicine is very important, and the whole area, what I call autonomous research, is super key in drug discovery and how it can all happen, because the entire research process and experimentation process can be automated and is being automated, and there's some examples for it. And I think that's going to manifest itself as it is very strongly in medicine. Awesome. I hope you will enjoy the rest of the conference, and we'll stay in touch. Take care. Bye-bye.